Hello. I want to talk in this section about the term trauma that is used to refer to several different things, and that it creates a little bit of a problem when we are trying to communicate our symptoms or our situation, and we mix the term trauma with different things. So hopefully, this short piece will clarify what trauma is and help us communicating better when we talk about trauma. So, what is the meaning of trauma, right? What exactly? So, I look in the dictionary and several definitions, and I found that the confusion comes from the literature and from the media, right? Like what we read is confusing. So the first thing in terms of psychiatry, right, the APA, the American Psychiatric Association, defines trauma as an emotional response to a terrible event like an accident, rape, or natural disaster. So they say there is an emotional response, right, connected to a terrible event. That's APS definition. Sigmund Freud had a very interesting definition that is actually pretty accurate in terms of the disorder. So, the experience of being overwhelmed by an adaptive demand that renders the ego passive, helpless, and unable to anticipate, cope, and integrate. So, he has several important pieces here, right? So it's the experience of being overwhelmed. So it's not just an experience, but is linked with the capacity for us to stand the experience or the response, right? Then the Merriam-Webster says that it's a disorder, psychic or behavioral state resulting for severe mental or emotional stress or physical injury, right? So it's including in physical injury because in the past, um, trauma was only considered like a physical injury, right? And it says that it's a state. So it's something that is a little bit more permanent than just the Psychiatric Association that is telling us that it's only a response to an event, right? And then our distinguished and loved Bessel van der Kolk, the writer of The Body Keeps the Score and one of the best advocates, more important advocates of trauma studies, says that trauma is about the body becoming immobilized, feeling helpless or numb, right? So he is talking about how the process goes to the point where we cannot move, we are incapable of continue functioning normally and feeling helpless or numb, right? And he described part of the physiology that is altered by trauma, right? So what we can conclude with all these definitions, and I could include more, but in reality is that we find definitions that says that trauma is an event. Another say that trauma is an experience. Others say that it's a response or a reaction, and the most accurate says that it's an injury and officially a disorder, right? So this is how it's used, and I'm going to go through them just to clarify where is the difference and why we should not call them, for example, an event, call them trauma. So what is traumatic, right? So traumatic means that it's emotionally disturbing or distressing and relating to or causing psychological trauma, right? So something is traumatic when it has the potential to leave us with a problem in the future, right? So that something that is actually put us at risk of our lives, of our integrity, or like is putting ourselves at risk is when something is traumatic. So something is traumatic when it has the capacity to cause damage, right? So traumatic events are all those events like being, let's imagine being pointed with a gun, that could be a traumatic event, because we feel that we are in danger, right? Or being assaulted, or being in war, or being in a car accident, or having a surgery. Those things that have the capacity to make us be less well, right? Let's say all those events can be considered traumatic. I would say that almost every surgery is traumatic, right? Because it's putting ourselves at risk of dying, uh, for example, right? So, but that is, the event is traumatic because it has the potential. Okay. Then is what is traumatizing. So traumatizing is what the event is doing to me, right? So the event can be dangerous in itself, independently of me, but then traumatizing is the characteristic of what I go through. Traumatic is the characteristic of the event. Traumatizing is what happens to me, and is the subjective experience of danger, right? So let's say that I'm going to the dentist, and that is not traumatic in itself because it's not going to put my life at risk, but I could consider it be traumatizing because I am so afraid of anesthesia, let's say, or syringes, that just by seeing them, I consider um, myself at risk, and that traumatizes me, right? So traumatizing means that I exceeds the capacity of staying regulated, because my fear is going to activate my defenses in a way that is going to be like damaging to my system, which is what is trauma actually. Okay, so yeah, so it means that traumatizing depends on the person, not on the event itself, right? Um, for everybody, an experience can be normal, while for me can be traumatic or traumatizing because I suffer from fear and from all the fear reactions when I am in that situation. So traumatizing really depends on the person, right? So in in terms of survival, right? Traumatizing or trauma is related to being terrified, being shocked, being scared, being surprised, being confused, to an extreme that we then have an experience or a response and a reaction from our nervous system that creates the trauma, right? Trauma is what is left in our system, is the disorder, is the alteration on the functioning of our nervous system that is going to stay as an illness, as an injury, right? So trauma comes from the Greek word that literally means wound, right? Or injury. It leaves a mark on our functioning, and that's what trauma really means, right? So trauma is in reality a spectrum, but trauma is, we are going to make the separation, like a trauma is not an event that happened to me that was traumatizing. That is a traumatic event that traumatized me. But trauma, when we talk about trauma, we are going to refer to the fact that my system had alterations on the functioning that are going to create dysfunction, mood dysregulation, and the loss of homeostasis. So trauma is, like, in general, people call it PTSD, but PTSD is very specific to psychiatric application. And so when we talk, and when I talk in my lessons about trauma, I'm talking about PTSD and all the other manifestations of having been traumatized. Okay, so thank you.